When the paramedics loaded my wife and her lover into the ambulance, they were still connected in a way that defied both nature and dignity. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. The Tuesday afternoon that changed everything. My name is Demetrio Thomas. I'm 70 years old and I've lived in Austin, Texas my whole life. I spent 40 years as a general contractor, building half the foundations in this county. I know how to pour concrete so it lasts 100 years, and I know how to spot a crack in a structure before the whole thing comes down. Turns out, I wasn't looking closely enough at the foundation of my own house. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late spring, and my lower back was throbbing with that familiar dull ache that comes when the humidity rises above 80%. It's the price you pay for 4 decades of lifting lumber and bending over blueprints. I went into the master bathroom looking for my prescription anti-inflammatory pills. Usually, I keep them in the medicine cabinet on the middle shelf, right next to my blood pressure medication. But the shelf was empty except for Kathleen's expensive face creams, the kind that promised to turn back time for $200 an ounce. I remembered her mentioning she'd tidied up the bathroom earlier that morning. Kathleen is my wife. She's 58 years old, which makes her 12 years younger than me. We've been married for 20 years, though lately it feels more like a business arrangement than a partnership. She spends hours at the gym, or so she says, and hundreds of dollars on treatments and procedures to keep herself looking young. She tells me it's for her health, but I have my doubts. I looked around the bathroom and saw her gym bag sitting on the vanity counter. It was unzipped slightly, the black nylon gaping open like a mouth. I figured she might have swept my pill bottle into her bag by mistake when she was rushing to her yoga class that morning. She was always rushing somewhere these days. I reached into the bag, expecting to feel the familiar plastic of the pill bottle, or maybe a damp towel from her workout. Instead, my hand brushed against something silky. I pulled it out slowly, and my stomach dropped. It was a pair of bright red lace panties, not the practical cotton ones she wears around the house. These were crotchless, the kind of thing you see in catalogs that arrive in brown paper envelopes. Intricate lace, expensive fabric, clearly designed for one purpose. I held them up to the light, staring at the delicate pattern. Kathleen hasn't worn anything like this for me in over a decade. In fact, for the last 3 years, our bedroom has been as dead as a cemetery on Christmas morning. She always had an excuse ready, delivered with just the right amount of exasperation. Demetrio, I'm going through menopause. Demetrio, you're 70 years old. Let's just get some sleep. Demetrio, why can't you understand? My body doesn't work that way anymore. She made me feel like a pervert for even trying to touch my own wife. She made me feel withered and useless, like an old piece of equipment that should have been scrapped years ago. But here in my hand was proof that her libido wasn't dead. It just wasn't directed at me. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. My hands started shaking, not from age, but from the first stirrings of rage. I dug deeper into the bag. Underneath the red lace, I found a box of Magnum condoms, half empty. Next to it was a sleek black tube with elegant silver lettering, Velvet Touch, Premium Warming Lubricant. I stood there in the silence of my own bathroom, freezing despite the humid air. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. She told me she was dry. She told me her body had shut down, that it was a medical condition beyond her control. Yet here she was, carrying a tube of high-end lubricant in her gym bag, along with lingerie that probably cost more than my weekly grocery bill. I should have been screaming. I should have been throwing things, storming downstairs to call a divorce lawyer. But 40 years in construction teaches you one thing. When you find a problem, you don't panic. You assess the damage, you look for the cause, you trace it back to the source. I brought the bag closer to my face and inhaled. I expected the smell of sweat, or maybe the lavender scent of the yoga studio she claimed to visit 3 times a week. But there was no sweat smell. The bag reeked of perfume. Her expensive Chanel mixed with something else, something masculine. A musky, woodsy scent that didn't belong to me. I knew that smell. It was cheap cologne, the kind you buy at the drugstore when you want to smell like a rich man but don't have the wallet for it. It smelled like cedarwood and desperation. And in that moment, it hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I knew exactly who wore that cologne. Brandon Miller is a real estate agent here in Austin. He's 45 years old, with a smile that shows too many teeth and a handshake that's always a little too damp. 10 years ago, when Brandon was just starting out and nobody would give him the time of day, I loaned him $50,000 to start his agency. I treated him like a son. I sent business his way. I introduced him to my contacts in the construction world. I invited him to my home for barbecues and holiday dinners. I remembered the last time Brandon came over. He'd clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Mr. Thomas, you're the salt of the earth. I wouldn't be where I am without you." He had looked me in the eye and thanked me for everything. And all the while, he must have been wearing this same cheap cologne while fantasizing about my wife. My hands were shaking harder now, but not from age. They were shaking with a cold, hard rage that started in my gut and spread through my entire body like ice water in my veins. I looked at the receipt tucked into the side pocket of the bag. It was a reservation confirmation, printed on cheap paper. The Magnolia is a sleazy place on the outskirts of town, the kind of motel that rents rooms by the hour and doesn't ask for ID. So that was their plan, a cheap thrill in a cheap motel while I sat at home thinking my wife was at a charity fundraiser. Suddenly, I heard the front door open downstairs. The click of heels on the hardwood floor echoed through the house. "Demetrio, are you home?" Kathleen called out. Her voice was cheerful, too cheerful. The voice of a woman who thinks she's gotten away with murder. I had a split second to decide what to do. I could confront her right now. I could wave the red panties in her face and demand a divorce. I could throw Brandon's name at her and watch her crumble. I could let 20 years of rage pour out in one volcanic eruption. But then I remembered something else. Last week, Kathleen had been pushing me to sign a new power of attorney document. She'd brought it up over breakfast, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Demetrio, you're 70 now, and you're getting a little forgetful. We need to protect your assets. What if something happens to your health?" She had looked so concerned, so loving, placing her hand over mine with those perfectly manicured nails. Now, looking at the condoms and the lube, I realized it wasn't love. It was strategy. She didn't just want to cheat on me. She wanted to control me. She wanted to sideline me, maybe even warehouse me somewhere while she liquidated everything I'd spent 40 years building. If I confronted her now, she would play the victim. She would say I was paranoid. She would say I was a jealous old man losing his mind. She might even use my outburst to prove I was mentally unstable, that I needed to be managed for my own protection. No, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I quickly put the tube of Velvet Touch back into the bag. I stuffed the red panties underneath it, arranging everything exactly as I had found it. I zipped the bag up with surgical precision. I took a deep breath and looked in the mirror. I saw a 70-year-old face with deep lines and gray hair thinning at the crown, but the eyes were sharp. They were the eyes of a man who had negotiated million-dollar contracts and survived job sites that would break weaker men. I heard her footsteps on the stairs. "Demetrio, are you up there?" she called again, her voice rising with a hint of impatience. I opened the medicine cabinet and grabbed a bottle of aspirin, not what I'd been looking for, but it would serve as my prop. I turned just as Kathleen walked into the bedroom. She stopped when she saw me standing next to her gym bag. For a second, just a fraction of a second, her mask slipped. I saw genuine panic flash in her eyes. Her gaze darted to the bag, then back to my face, searching for any sign that I knew. "Oh, Demetrio, you startled me," she said, putting a hand to her chest in an exaggerated gesture. "What are you doing in here?" I kept my face completely blank. I held up the bottle of aspirin, letting my hand tremble slightly, the tremor of an old man, harmless and confused. "Just looking for my back pills, Kathy," I said, making my voice sound raspy and tired. "That old injury is flaring up again. I thought maybe I left them on the counter." She rushed forward and grabbed the gym bag, pulling it away from me. She hugged it to her chest defensively, her knuckles white against the black nylon. "You know I don't like you digging through my personal things, Demetrio," she said, her voice sharp now. "It's just sweaty gym clothes in there. You don't want to touch that. It's gross." I looked at her carefully. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost $500. Her hair was perfectly styled, blown out and sprayed into place. There wasn't a drop of sweat on her. "You're right, dear," I said, scratching my head and adding a slight tremor to my hand, playing the part she wanted me to play, the part of the old, confused husband. "I must have misplaced them. I'm getting so forgetful lately, just like you said." She relaxed visibly. A smug smile touched the corners of her lips. She thought she was safe. She thought she was smarter than the old contractor. "Why don't you go downstairs and watch your television shows, Demetrio?" she said, patting my arm with a condescending touch. "I'll take a shower and then I'll make you some soup. You look tired." "I am tired, Kathy," I said, letting my shoulders sag. I'm very tired. I walked out of this bedroom and headed down the stairs, my footsteps heavy and deliberate. As I walked away, I heard the bathroom door lock behind her with a decisive click. She was probably checking the bag right now, making sure everything was still in place, reassuring herself that her secret was safe. I went through the kitchen and out the back door into the garage. My garage is my sanctuary. It's filled with tools I've collected over 40 years, saws, drills, hammers, and shelves full of solvents and adhesives. The air smells like sawdust and old motor oil, familiar and comforting. I stood in front of my workbench and thought about the last 20 years. I thought about the house I built for her with my own hands, the cars I bought her, the way I paid off her credit card debts when we first met. I thought about Brandon, the man I helped when he was nothing but a failed dream and a desperate handshake. They thought I was a clueless old man. They thought they could use my money to fund their affair and then toss me aside like a broken tool. For a moment, just a brief, dark moment, I looked at my wall of tools. There were saws that could cut through solid oak in seconds. There were drills that could pierce steel. It would be so easy to take a sledgehammer to that Lexus she loved so much. It would be easy to storm back upstairs and tear that bag apart and scream until the windows rattled. But that's what a weak man would do. That's what a man with no control would do. And Kathleen expected me to be weak. She expected me to be the confused old man who could barely find his aspirin. If I exploded now, she would just use it against me. She would tell the judge I was unstable. She would tell Brandon that I was dangerous. They would commit me to a home and sell my house before the ink was dry on the papers. No, I needed something else. I needed a solution that was elegant in its cruelty. I needed a punishment that fit the crime. My eyes scanned the rows of solvents and adhesives on the top shelf. I had everything up there, from wood glue to contact cement, but I needed something stronger, something permanent. Then I saw it. Tucked behind a can of paint thinner was a gray tube with bold black lettering, marine epoxy. I had used this stuff 5 years ago when I repaired the hull of my fishing boat. It's not like regular glue. It's designed to bond fiberglass and steel underwater. It's designed to withstand high pressure and extreme heat. Once this stuff sets, it doesn't let go. You have to grind it off or cut it out. It's waterproof. It's chemical-proof. It's essentially liquid concrete. I took the tube down and weighed it in my hand. It felt heavy, solid, cold. I read the warning label on the back. Danger. Causes severe skin irritation. Bonds in 5 minutes. Do not use on skin. Seek medical attention immediately if contact occurs. A grim smile touched my lips. Kathleen wanted to play dirty. She wanted to humiliate me, to discard me like trash. Well, this was going to be the ultimate humiliation. But even as I held the tube, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, "Is this too far? Is this too cruel?" I thought about the power of attorney. I thought about shady acres. I thought about waking up in some state-funded facility, drugged and forgotten, while Kathleen and Brandon spent my money in Mexico. I thought about 20 years of sacrifice, of being made to feel worthless in my own home. The doubt vanished. They wanted to play games? Fine, we'd play. But they forgot one thing. I wrote the rule book on building traps. I grabbed a large plastic syringe from my toolbox, the kind I used to inject wood glue into termite holes. I grabbed a pair of latex gloves and a roll of paper towels. I checked my watch. The water was still running upstairs. Kathleen takes long showers. She likes to scrub away the world and pretend she's a queen in a spa. That gave me maybe 10 minutes. I slipped the epoxy and the syringe into my pocket and walked back into the house. The floorboards creaked under my boots, but the sound of the shower masked my approach. This was it. The point of no return. I climbed the stairs one by one, careful not to make a sound. The bedroom was empty. Steam was curling out from under the bathroom door, carrying the scent of her expensive lavender body wash. It made me sick. I walked over to the vanity where the gym bag sat, innocent and unassuming. I unzipped it with surgical precision, my heart hammering against my ribs, not out of fear, but out of a strange, cold excitement. This was a job. This was a demolition project. And Demetrio Thomas had never left a job unfinished. I took out the black tube of Velvet Touch lubricant. It felt sleek and expensive in my rough, calloused hand, the hand of a man who'd spent 40 years working with concrete and steel, not silk and lies. I unscrewed the cap carefully. Inside, I could see the clear, viscous gel. I took the empty syringe and inserted the tip into the nozzle of the lube tube. Slowly, I pulled the plunger back, watching the silicone fluid get sucked into the chamber. It came out easily, almost eagerly, as if it wanted to be part of my plan. I emptied the syringe into a wad of paper towels I'd shoved in my pocket. I did this 3 times until the tube was flat and empty, collapsed like a deflated balloon. Now came the hard part. I took out the marine epoxy. The tube was cold in my hand, industrial gray with black warning labels screaming danger. I carefully squeezed the thick paste into the back of the syringe. It was viscous and heavy, resistant. It looked almost exactly like the lubricant, maybe slightly grayer, slightly thicker. But in the dim light of a cheap motel room, with passion and urgency clouding judgment, they'd never notice. The epoxy had a faint chemical smell, but I knew it would be masked by her perfume, his cologne, and the musty odor of the Magnolia Motel. I inserted the syringe back into the empty lube tube and pushed the plunger. I forced the industrial adhesive inside, filling the void where the lubricant had been. The tube puffed back up, returning to its original shape. It was perfect. I cleaned the nozzle with the corner of my shirt, making sure there was no residue on the threads that might give away the switch. I screwed the cap back on tight and held the tube up to the light. It looked innocent, it looked like a promise of pleasure, but I knew what was inside. I knew that the moment this substance touched body heat and moisture, it would begin a chemical reaction that would fuse human skin together like 2 pieces of welded steel. I heard the water shut off in the bathroom. My heart rate spiked, but my hand stayed steady. 40 years of working under pressure had taught me that. I placed the tube back into the bag and tucked the red lace panties over it, exactly as I'd found them. I zipped the bag shut and checked the room one more time. No drops of glue, no paper towels, no sign that I'd ever been there. I walked back out into the hall just as the bathroom door opened. I made it to the top of the stairs before Kathleen stepped out, wrapped in a fluffy white towel, her hair turbaned in another. Her skin was pink from the heat, and she looked fresh and clean and completely oblivious. She saw me standing there and stopped, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. "I thought you were downstairs, Demetrio," she said, tightening the towel around her chest. "I was just checking the thermostat," I said, my voice raspy and old. "It feels a little chilly in here, don't you think?" She rolled her eyes. "It's 72 degrees, Demetrio. It's perfectly fine. You're just getting old and your blood is thin. Go sit down before you fall down." She walked past me, trailing that lavender scent, humming a little tune. I recognized it. It was a love song from the radio, something about finding your soulmate. She was happy. She was thinking about Friday. She was thinking about Brandon and the motel room and the red panties. She had no idea that the bag she was reaching for contained a time bomb. "You're right, Kathy," I whispered to the closed bedroom door. "I am old, but I still know how to build a trap." I went downstairs and turned on the television. I sat in my chair and stared at the screen, but I didn't see the news. I saw the future. I saw Friday, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Friday morning. Friday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised peach and humidity that made your shirt stick to your back the moment you stepped outside. I was sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee, when Kathleen walked in. If she was going to a real estate seminar in Houston, she was certainly the best-dressed student in the class. She wore a tailored navy blue suit with a skirt that hit just above the knee, a silk scarf tied effortlessly around her neck. Her hair was sprayed into an immovable helmet of blonde perfection, and she smelled like she'd bathed in Chanel No. 5. She looked expensive. She looked like the trophy wife she'd always wanted to be. I watched her over the rim of my mug as she bustled around the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of water and checking her reflection in the microwave door. She was vibrating with energy, not the nervous energy of someone lying, but the excited energy of a woman going on a date. "Demetrio, I'm heading out," she said, flashing me a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "The traffic to Houston is going to be a nightmare if I don't leave now." Houston. That was the lie. She claimed there was a 2-day seminar on commercial property management. She said she wanted to help me manage our rental units better since I was getting too old to handle the stress. It was a good lie. It made her sound responsible. "That's good, Kathy," I said, keeping my voice low and raspy. "You drive safe now. Those highways are dangerous." She walked over to me. She didn't lean down to kiss me on the lips. Instead, she placed a hand on my shoulder and kissed my forehead, the kind of kiss you give a child before you drop them off at daycare, or an invalid who doesn't know what day of the week it is. "I left your lunch in the fridge," she said, patting my cheek. "And Demetrio, don't forget to take your brain supplements. I put them right next to the coffee maker. We don't want you wandering off again, do we?" I had never wandered off in my life. But that was part of her narrative now, the story she was carefully constructing, making sure that if I ever tried to speak up against her, people would just think it was the dementia talking. "I'll take them, dear," I said, forcing a weak smile. "You have fun in Houston. Learn a lot." "Oh, I will," she said with a wink. "I will." She grabbed her gym bag, the one containing the time bomb I'd planted, and headed for the door. I listened to the heavy thud of the door closing and the click of the lock. I heard her heels clicking down the driveway to her Lexus. The engine purred to life, smooth and expensive. I waited until the sound of the engine faded down the street. Then I stood up. I walked to the sink and poured the rest of my coffee down the drain. I was done playing the feeble old man. The tail. I went out the back door to the detached garage. My truck was waiting there, a 1990 Ford F-150 with peeling paint on the hood and a dent in the rear bumper from a job site mishap back in '98. Kathleen hates this truck. She calls it a rust bucket. She refuses to ride in it. But this truck has never let me down. It starts every time. And most importantly, it blends in. Nobody looks twice at an old pickup truck in Texas. I climbed into the cab and turned the key. The engine roared to life with a familiar rumble. I backed out of the garage and headed down the street, keeping a safe distance behind the Lexus. I knew the route to the highway, but I also knew she wasn't going to the highway. I stayed 2 cars back as she drove confidently through the morning traffic. She didn't take the on-ramp for Interstate 10 toward Houston. Instead, she turned left, heading toward the upscale district on the west side of town, the domain of young professionals and overpriced coffee shops. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight. She pulled into the circular driveway of the Overlook, a luxury apartment complex with a concierge and a rooftop pool, the kind of place where rent costs more than most people's mortgage. I pulled my truck into a side street and cut the engine. I watched through the windshield. A minute later, the glass doors of the lobby opened and a man walked out, Brandon Miller. Seeing him in the flesh made my stomach turn. He was wearing a slim-fit suit that looked too tight and sunglasses that cost too much. He was carrying a leather weekender bag, walking with a swagger that said he owned the world. I watched as Kathleen popped the trunk of her Lexus. Brandon threw his bag in next to hers. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. Before he got in, he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a forehead kiss. It was a long, hungry kiss, right there in the open, in the circular driveway where anyone could see. I felt bile rise in my throat. I looked at Brandon, and I didn't see the successful real estate agent. I saw the scared kid who came to my office 10 years ago, sweating through his cheap shirt, begging for help. I remembered him sitting in my chair, telling me he was broke, that he had a vision for a real estate firm, but no bank would touch him. He had looked at me with pleading eyes and said, "Mr. Thomas, you're the only one who believes in me. If you help me, I promise I'll make you proud." I had written him a check for $50,000 that day, my personal savings, and this was how he repaid me. They were laughing as he got into the car. I could see their silhouettes through the rear window. Kathleen reached over and touched his leg, intimate and familiar. They pulled out of the driveway and turned right, heading away from the city center. I waited a count of 10, then pulled out behind them. We drove for 40 minutes. They headed north, away from the suburbs and into the scrubby hill country that surrounds Austin. The houses got fewer and farther between. The strip malls gave way to old gas stations and empty fields. They turned off the main road onto a gravel drive marked by a faded neon sign, the Magnolia Motel. It was the kind of place you go when you don't want to be found. Single-story units arranged in a U-shape around a parking lot that had more weeds than asphalt. The paint was peeling off the doors. An ice machine hummed loudly in the corner. It was cheap. It was secluded. It was perfect for dirty secrets. Kathleen parked the Lexus in front of room 104. It looked out of place there, like a diamond in a gutter. I drove past the entrance and parked my truck behind an abandoned diner across the street. I grabbed my binoculars and a baseball cap, pulling the brim low over my eyes. I walked into the motel office. The lobby smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. A young man with headphones around his neck was behind the counter, barely looking up from his phone. "I need a room," I said, keeping my head down. $70 a night, he mumbled. "Cash or card?" "Cash," I said, sliding the bills across the counter. "I want room 105. He looked up, confused. "Why that one? We got nicer ones in the back." "I like the view," I said flatly. He shrugged and tossed a key onto the counter. "Checkout is at 11. No loud parties." I took the key and walked out. Room 105 was directly across the parking lot from room 104, front row seat. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was dark and musty, the curtains drawn tight. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to the window and peered through the crack in the curtains. I saw them. Brandon was taking the bags out of the trunk. Kathleen was standing by the door of room 104, unlocking it. She looked excited, like a teenager sneaking out of the house. Brandon walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck. She giggled and leaned back into him. They stumbled into the room together, and the door clicked shut. I pulled a chair over to the window and sat down. Then I reached into my canvas tool bag and pulled out a device I hadn't used in 15 years. It wasn't a doctor's stethoscope. This was a specialized acoustic listening device used by plumbers and contractors to find leaks behind walls or identify termites eating through support beams. It looked like a mechanic's tool with a sensitive diaphragm and heavy-duty industrial headphones. I'd bought it back in the 90s when I was working on a high-end renovation downtown. The client had a water leak somewhere behind a wall of imported Italian marble, and he refused to let me break any tiles until I knew exactly where the pipe had burst. This tool had saved me thousands of dollars then. Today, it was going to save my life. I pulled the cheap laminate dresser away from the shared wall. The construction of the Magnolia Motel was exactly what I expected from a place that charged $70 a night. It was wood frame construction with minimal insulation and a single layer of half-inch drywall separating the units. Acoustically speaking, it was like having a conversation through a sheet of paper. I put the headphones on and pressed the sensor against the painted drywall. At first, all I heard was the hum of their air conditioner and the muffled sound of footsteps. They were moving around the room. I heard the distinct sound of a zipper being pulled, not the zipper of a dress or a pair of pants, but the heavy rasp of a luggage zipper. I adjusted the volume on the amplifier. I expected to hear the sounds of passion. I expected giggles and whispers and the creaking of bed springs. I had steeled myself for the pain of hearing my wife make love to another man. But what I heard next was not the sound of betrayal. It was the sound of a business transaction. "Did you bring it?" Brandon's voice came through the headphones, clear and sharp. He sounded impatient, not hungry for her body, but hungry for something else. "I got it," Kathleen replied. Her voice was steady, devoid of the nervous energy she'd shown at home. I heard the rustle of stiff paper. High-quality bond paper. I pressed the sensor harder against the wall. "I got him to sign the power of attorney yesterday," she said. Her voice was cold, clinical. "I told him it was just an update for his insurance policy. The old fool didn't even read it. He just signed where I pointed. He trusts me completely. It's pathetic, really." My blood ran cold. The power of attorney. She had been nagging me about that for weeks, saying it was for my protection in case I had a stroke or an accident. Now, hearing her tone, I realized she must have swapped pages or added clauses I'd missed. "So it's full control?" Brandon asked, and I could hear the greed in his voice, palpable and thick. "Full control," Kathleen confirmed. "Financial, medical, everything. As soon as we get back on Sunday, I'm going to have him admitted." "Admitted?" The word hung in the air like a noose. "I found a place called Shady Acres over in East Austin," she continued, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "It's a state-funded facility. It smells like bleach and boiled cabbage, but it's cheap. I spoke to the director. I told him Demetrio has been having violent episodes, dementia with aggression. With the power of attorney, I can have him committed for a 72-hour hold, and then we can extend it indefinitely. Once he's in the system, nobody listens to a crazy old man." I sat there in the dark, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just about sex. This was a hit job. She wasn't planning to leave me. She was planning to erase me. She was going to lock me away in a warehouse for the dying while she lived off the fruits of my labor. "And the assets?" Brandon asked. "I have the deeds right here," Kathleen said. The house in the suburbs, the rental duplexes on Lamar, and the big one, the 10 acres of commercial land down south. Sell the land first, Brandon said quickly. I have a buyer lined up, a developer from Dallas. He's offering $2 million cash for a quick close, no inspections. $2 million. That land was my retirement. It was the nest egg I had held onto for 30 years, waiting for the right time to sell. It was worth 3 times that amount, but a fire sale would bring instant cash. We can close in 2 weeks, Brandon said. Once the money hits the account, we transfer it to the Cayman Shell Company, and we're gone. By the time anyone realizes old Demetrio isn't just senile but destitute, we'll be sipping margaritas in Cabo. Kathleen giggled. It sounded girlish and grotesque. I can't wait to be rid of him, Brandon. You have no idea what it's like. He smells like old sawdust and liniment. He's so boring. All he talks about is construction codes and the weather. I feel like I'm living in a museum. I gripped the stethoscope so hard my knuckles turned white. But then I heard something else, something in Brandon's tone that Kathleen missed because she was too busy counting her chickens. We need that $2 million, Kathy, Brandon said, and his voice was tight, strained. I have investors who are getting impatient. If I don't pay them back by the first of the month, things are going to get ugly. Investors. I knew what that meant. Brandon wasn't a savvy businessman. He was a gambler. I'd heard rumors around town that he played high-stakes poker. If he needed $2 million fast, he wasn't investing it. He was paying off a debt to people who broke legs for a living. He was using her. He didn't love her. He was drowning, and she was his life raft. He was going to take my money, pay off his debts, and likely leave her stranded in Mexico with nothing but a suitcase full of red lingerie. The irony was almost enough to make me laugh. She was destroying me to save a man who was going to destroy her. Enough business, Brandon said abruptly. Put those away. We have 2 hours before I have to meet the contact. Let's make the most of it. Oh, Brandon, Kathleen cooed, her voice shifting instantly from cold calculator to seductive mistress. I missed you so much. I heard the sound of clothes rustling, the belt buckle hitting the floor, the heavy thud of shoes being kicked off. You brought the bag, right? Brandon asked, his voice thick. Of course, Kathleen whispered. I brought everything, the outfit you like. And the other thing. I leaned forward. This was it, the moment the trap was sprung. Where is it? Brandon asked. I want to try that premium stuff you talked about, the velvet touch. It's in the side pocket, Kathleen said. Hand it to me. I heard the sound of a zipper, the sound of a plastic tube being handled. Here, baby, Brandon said. I heard the cap unscrew. It was a small sound, but in my headphones, it sounded like the click of a trigger being pulled. Hurry up, Brandon groaned through my headphones. I'm losing my patience. Hold on, Kathleen said. Why is it so thick? It's premium silicone, baby. It's supposed to be thick. Just use a lot of it. I heard the tube being squeezed, the wet sound of thick paste hitting skin. Oh, wow, Brandon said. That feels different. It's warm. It's warming lube, Kathleen laughed. It's supposed to heat up. Yeah, but it's getting really hot, like really hot. Just relax. Come here. The bed springs began creaking rhythmically. About 30 seconds passed. Oh, God, Brandon groaned. That's tight. It's the friction, Kathleen breathed. It feels good. Yeah. Wait, the spring stopped. Kathy, it's burning. Mine too, Kathleen said, her voice rising. It stings. Okay, stop, I need to pull out. A pause. Then Brandon grunted with exertion. Brandon, what are you doing? Kathleen cried. I can't pull out. Brandon's voice climbed into panic. It's stuck. What do you mean stuck? Just pull harder. I am pulling. It's not moving. It's like we're glued together. I took the headphones off. Through the wall, I heard a scream, pure terror. It burns, Kathleen shrieked. Get off me! I can't, Brandon roared. It's ripping my skin. The marine epoxy had set. The chemical reaction was generating heat as it cured, fusing their flesh together like welded steel. I walked to the table, poured coffee, added sugar, stirred slowly. From next door came crashing sounds. They were thrashing like animals in a trap. Help us! Somebody help us! I sipped my coffee. Still hot. Good. I checked my watch. The epoxy was in gel phase now, sticky, hot, unforgiving. Every movement they made only tore their skin more. The more they pulled, the worse it got. I pulled out my flip phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Yes, ma'am, I said, voice shaking with fear. I'm at the Magnolia Motel, room 104. I think there's a domestic dispute. Sounds bad. Someone keeps yelling about burning. I think someone might be dying. We're sending officers in an ambulance. Stay in your room and lock the door. Please hurry. It sounds awful. I hung up and sat back down. The screaming had turned into sobbing, low, guttural moans. I waited for the sirens. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flooded the parking lot. Sirens wailed. A patrol car screeched in, then another, then the ambulance. I checked my appearance one last time, messed up my hair, hunched my shoulders, practiced the bewildered look of a confused old man woken by chaos. I stepped out onto the walkway. The parking lot was filling with people, truck drivers, other guests, the night clerk, everyone drawn to the spectacle. 2 young officers banged on the door of room 104. Police, open up! We have reports of a disturbance! Only high-pitched keening answered them. Kick it! The door splintered. Both officers rushed in, guns drawn. Freeze! Let me see your hands! Then silence. Confused silence. Jesus Christ, one officer said clearly. What the hell is this? I moved closer with the crowd, leaning over the railing. From my angle, I could see into the room. Kathleen and Brandon were tangled in sheets, locked together, bodies contorted in agony. Brandon arched backward, face covered in sweat and tears. Kathleen clutched his shoulders, trying to hide her face. They looked like a 2-headed beast writhing in pain. We need a medic now! The paramedics rushed in, a bearded man and a younger woman. She snapped on gloves and approached. Sir, ma'am, where are you hurt? Down there, Brandon gasped, pointing. It burns. We're stuck. The male paramedic shined a light on their joined bodies, then recoiled. What is that? It looks like cement. It was the lube, Kathleen sobbed. It was supposed to be lube. He touched the gray substance with a gloved finger and tapped it. It made a dull, hard sound. This isn't lubricant. This is industrial adhesive, high strength, fully cured, hard as rock. He looked at them with pity and disbelief. You're chemically bonded. You have chemical burns. The adhesive is stronger than your tissue. If you pull, you'll rip yourselves open. Get us apart, Brandon screamed. We can't dissolve it here. You need surgery. We have to transport you. Transport? Like this? Together? There's no other way. The reality rippled through the crowd. People whispered, pointed. Phones came out, recording everything. Bring the gurney. The logistics of moving 2 people fused as one was grotesque. They had to shuffle to the bed's edge as a unit, Kathleen whimpering, Brandon's veins bulging. They looked like a crab crawling sideways. 4 men lifted them onto the stretcher. Brandon screamed. They had to lie on their sides, facing each other in a perverse embrace to fit. The medics strapped them down and threw a sheet over them, but the shape underneath was unmistakable. They wheeled them out. The crowd erupted. Oh my God! Are they stuck together? That's what you get for cheating, someone laughed. I pulled out my phone, steadied it against a pillar, and zoomed in. The wind caught the sheet for a second. I saw Kathleen's face, makeup streaked down her cheeks, eyes wild with panic. She looked at the people filming her, and realization hit. Her life was over. This would be online in an hour. Then Brandon, broken, eyes squeezed shut, trying to wish himself away. I pressed record and captured them being loaded into the ambulance. The awkward maneuvering, Brandon's foot twitching in agony, Kathleen trying to cover her face but unable to move without pulling him. The ambulance doors slammed. The siren wailed. They disappeared toward the hospital. I stopped recording and saved the video. I had everything I needed. I walked to my truck and started the engine. As I passed room 104, I saw the broken door, the chaos inside, the ruined bed. I turned onto the highway heading toward the hospital, not as a worried husband, but as an executioner arriving to deliver the final blow. The automatic doors slid open. I shuffled to the triage desk, shoulders slumped, eyes wide. Excuse me, ma'am, I'm looking for my wife, Kathleen Thomas. The police called. They said there was an accident. The nurse's head snapped up. Recognition flashed in her eyes. Oh, you're the husband? Yes, ma'am. Is she okay? She's being evaluated. Please sit. I'll get the doctor. 10 minutes later, Dr. Williams led me to a consultation room. Mr. Thomas, Your wife and a man named Brandon Miller were brought in with severe chemical burns and adhesion. High-strength industrial epoxy was introduced during intimate contact. It's bonded their skin in the pelvic region. I gasped, covering my mouth. Oh my God! We have to surgically separate them. We'll have to excise the affected skin. They'll need grafts. There will be significant scarring. The door opened. Officer Davis stepped in holding a clear evidence bag. Inside was the black tube. Mr. Thomas, we need to ask questions. This tube was recovered from the scene. It's not lubricant inside. It's marine-grade epoxy. He placed the bag on the table. Do you know anything about this? This was the moment, the pivot point. I looked from him to the doctor. Then I sobbed, grabbing my head with both hands. Oh no! Oh God, no, it's my fault. All my fault. What's your fault, Mr. Thomas? I was fixing the sink yesterday. The bathroom sink, the pipe was cracked. I got epoxy from the garage. I have tubes of it. I heaved a breath. I put the tube on the counter next to her things. My eyes, officer. I have cataracts. I'm getting surgery next month. I looked up, pleading. I thought it was her hand cream, or that gel for dry skin. She's always complaining about dry skin. I thought I was helping. I must have put the glue in her bag by mistake. You confused industrial glue with lubricant? It comes in a black tube. The epoxy I buy comes in a black tube too. Without my glasses, I'm just confused. Officer, I mix things up. Kathleen tells me all the time I'm losing my marbles. She says I put milk in the cupboard and cereal in the fridge. I buried my face in my hands. I did this. I ruined everything. Silence stretched. You said she tells you you're losing your marbles? Officer Davis's tone softened. Yes, she has me on supplements, made me sign papers last week, says I can't handle my affairs, says I'm a danger to myself. I guess she was right. Officer Davis looked at the doctor. We have her medical history, the doctor said. She's listed as his caregiver. There are notes about concerns regarding his cognitive decline. Officer Davis sighed. The suspicion in his eyes faded, replaced by pity. All right, Mr. Thomas. Considering the circumstances and medical history, it looks like a tragic accident. He stood, put a hand on my shoulder. You should know, sir, your wife wasn't at a seminar. She was at a motel with another man. I stared, letting shock wash over my face. Another man? Kathy was cheating? I slumped forward, so I glued my wife to her lover. Go home, Mr. Thomas. Get rest. The surgery will take hours. I shuffled out, past the nurses, past security. Outside in the humid night, I exhaled a breath held for 20 minutes. They bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. Kathleen had spent months painting me as senile. She'd laid the groundwork perfectly. She wanted to use my dementia to steal my money. Instead, I used it to walk away scot-free. I called Scott from the parking lot. Son, I need you. Now. Scott arrived with his laptop. He's 40, a corporate attorney, a shark. My son from my first marriage. He never liked Kathleen. Dad, what do you have? I handed him paper. Kathleen's cloud password. Got it last week. He typed it in. Folders filled the screen, a digital map of her secret life. He found messages. Texts between Kathy and Brandon. Search for cell land, bank, debt. Results appeared. Email with subject final notice. Mr. Miller, your extension expired. Our partners are losing patience. Principal plus interest, $2 million. If payment not received by the 1st, we'll collect in alternative ways. We know where you live. $2 million. Brandon's in deep. Scott found chat logs between Brandon and someone named Rocco. Brandon, the mark is clueless. His wife's doing all the heavy lifting. Brandon, the old hag is eating out of my hand. She thinks I'm in love with her. Pathetic. She's 58 trying to pass for 30. I just have to hold my nose for one more week. Once the land sells, I'm ghosting her. Wire you the cash, meet you in Cabo. She'll never see me again. I rid the screen. The old hag. Hold my nose. Ghosting her. She'd sold her soul for a man who despised her. Dad, this is enough for fraud charges. We can freeze her assets. Not yet. I want to see her face. I want to tell her. Scott nodded. I'll draft the papers. You take the lead. 4 a.m., a nurse found me. Mr. Thomas, they're out of surgery. You can see your wife. Scott grabbed his briefcase. After you, Dad. The recovery room was harsh white light, Kathleen on the left, Brandon on the right, both awake, groggy, pale. I stood at the foot of the beds. I wasn't wearing work clothes. I wore my charcoal suit, clean-shaven, shoulders squared. The confused old man was gone. "Demetrio," Kathleen croaked. "It hurts." I didn't move. Surgery is painful, especially when they peel you off another human. "Why are you acting like this? It was an accident." "No accidents, Kathy. Just like no seminar. No dementia." Her eyes widened. "What?" "I know everything. The power of attorney, shady acres, the land sale, the marine epoxy." I paused. "I put it there. I swapped the tubes." "You did this, you monster." "I'm the monster? I'm not the one planning to warehouse my spouse in a state facility." I pulled out my phone, found the audio, hit play. Brandon's voice filled the room. "The old hag is eating out of my hand. Pathetic. She's 58 trying to pass for 30. I have to hold my nose. Once the land sells, I'm ghosting her. She'll never see me again." Kathleen's face collapsed. She turned to Brandon, eyes filled with hatred. "You said you loved me." "Love you?" Brandon laughed bitterly. "You're a desperate old woman." She screamed, grabbed the water pitcher, hurled it at him. They started fighting, monitors alarming. Scott stepped forward, placed an envelope on Kathleen's table. "You're leaving with nothing. We have video, medical reports. You violated the fidelity clause." I looked at Brandon. "I made a call, told Rocco where you are. County General, room 302. Visiting hours start at 9. Brandon went white, hyperventilating. "I'm leaving now," I said, straightening my jacket. "Enjoy recovery. Skin grafts itch when they heal." Behind me, chaos erupted. Kathleen cursing Brandon, Brandon screaming for security, monitors alarming, nurses rushing. I stepped into the corridor. The door swung shut, muffling the screaming. I took a deep breath. It tasted like victory. Scott waited in the lobby. "We have work to do, Dad." I walked into the early morning sun. A new day. For the first time in 20 years, I was free. Kathleen was released a week later to nothing. I'd changed the locks, left her old suitcases on the porch. The divorce was swift, the fidelity clause, the evidence, the recordings. She got nothing. Last I heard, she was living in a studio apartment, working retail, buried in medical debt. Brandon never made it to court. He checked himself out against medical advice, desperate to run. They found him in a ditch outside San Antonio 3 days later. Alive, but his legs were shattered. Baseball bats. He'll never walk right again. He lives in a charity ward now, looking over his shoulder, terrified of every shadow. As for me, I sold the house, made a clean break. Bought a small ranch outside the city. My son visits every Sunday. I fish, I build things. I sleep well at night. People ask if I have regrets. I don't. They wanted to erase me, warehouse me, steal everything I'd built. They thought I was a harmless old fool. They forgot one thing. I spent 40 years building foundations and spotting cracks before structures collapse. And when I found the crack in my marriage, I didn't patch it. I brought the whole house down.